All right, welcome everyone to this fifth UnConference from Cryptoeconomics Hub. Today we're happy to have a guest introducing some very interesting concepts about economics of the blockchain. Tiago, whenever you're ready, feel free to introduce yourself, and let's get on with it.
Okay, thank you, Laurent. Just a short introduction about me. I have a master's in computer science. Although I understood that programming was not my life, so I decided to take an MBA, and there's where I learned about the business perspectives. And recently I started the project around. It's a blog, and every week we have a post in a different industry. What can be the new trends? So the presentation today will focus on the business impact of blockchain. So it's not supposed to be a discussion around concrete and technical implementations. It's around what is the potential of this technology, and how can we understand where it can impact, which markets, which players, and how can we try more or less to identify in our minds how can we approach those kinds of problems. So as it was on the agenda, the presentation that I'm going to do, it's what I describe as a curated view of an MIT paper that I found and shared on the group. And instead of just scrolling the paper and trying to do a scrolling presentation, I changed to a PowerPoint. So I tried to curate a bit of the content so that, of course, you can go on detail. But the key ideas, I hope that they are all in this presentation if you want to access it after. So the initial premise is that the nature of intermediation will change. So the intermediaries will still be needed in the author's point of view. Their role is going to change. And why? So the first, we have to understand what are the conditions that have to exist to impact the market in this technology. So we have to have transactions in this market that their attributes and contracts are expensive. We have to have platform operators that are enjoying excessive rents, so beyond their added value. And I think everyone can recall Uber here, Airbnb, and their fee. I think we all understand their utility, but we also can identify that they are charging extra. Another topic is around privacy. So when we are creating these transactions, our information is given to the platform. So as we saw with the Facebook scandal in the last month, it's a very problematic risk that people start to be aware, and that blockchain tackles. And the last one is the censorship risk. And this is related to the ability of that platform to select which transactions they execute or not, because it's not transparent. So the first cost that we are going to focus is the cost of verification. There are two costs that the authors talked about. This is the first one, and then I'll go to explain you also the second one. So regarding the first one, as I more or less described, intermediaries today gain market power through informational advantage. So their objective normally is to reduce the information asymmetry and the risk of moral hazard through third-party verification. So if I want to hire a driver, Uber does the validation if the driver is paying, or they have the proper documents, etc. And for that, and with their position, they charge a transaction fee. they have access to this transaction data, and they select which transactions they execute. So what does blockchain enable? Blockchain enables that our private information is not leaked. Why? Because it enforces contracts without exposing the underlying information. A very, very simple example is the possibility to validate a credit score rating without access to past transaction records. It's very cheap to verify ownership and exchanges of goods online. We are just talking online for now. And although gas is charged, is very small if we take in consideration the labor and capital in the traditional process. So what happens to trust? Trust is now placed on the underlying code and the consensus rules. And one of the figures of the paper, it clearly shows what is one of the main advantages of blockchain. So we have a transaction that is born with their attributes, so existence, timestamp, parties involved, and some actions are performed on this transaction. But a problem may arise, and if in the traditional world, we will have to get an intermediary, a audit, and it's very costly in terms of labor and capital. And what blockchain enables is the costless verification. And this is a very important topic, because one of the key things that I think that we have to look when we are trying to identify use cases for blockchain is, so is there a process of verification in place? If it exists, maybe we can really understand that blockchain is needed and can give us some competitive advantages in terms of economical cost. What is happening now is that the market is using hybrid solutions that complement incumbents. So they are focusing on settlements and reconciliation. They still need to try to maintain a user-friendly experience. So mass adoption requires that it's an app or a website that is still very, very easy to use, a service that is very easy to activate. So in these cases, the market is still using those conditions to lever their advantage. And we still have some edge cases, as an example, the chargebacks, that probably will take more time to be implemented. And the last thing, and I think it's one of the most important things, is that certifying information that requires offline forms of verification. I see a lot of examples that people build blockchains and they focus on, oh no, my information is in the blockchain, so as an example, my diamond is safe. And I think we have to be very careful, because for us to be able to verify that diamond is that diamond, we have to have a reliable way of doing that. And there is still a lot of work to do on that side.
Can you quickly explain what chargebacks are?
Yeah, so chargebacks are when you do a transaction with your credit card or debit card, and for some reason that company charges more, or you have some conflict with them, and so you ask your bank to get the money back. And in these cases, it's not easy to do the reverse operation.
Okay, I see.
So in this last, as I was talking about the offline forms, it's very important that we maintain a credible link between the offline events and their online record. And the second cost that we should focus on when we are trying to identify activities, processes, services that we want to understand if this technology is applicable or not, is the cost of networking. And why? Because there are novel ways of bootstrapping and operating. It's possible now to do a secure transfer and enforcement of property rights. As you can see, Ethereum just took them 2 years to reach 1 billion market cap. So if we want to create a new platform, it's way faster from the traditional way of doing it. We have early adopters that normally receive tokens. And I think one of the good points of these authors is that when I receive a token, I speed up the network effect because I have an incentive to do that. And it's just not be the early adopter that we have the new phone or the new product. Now we are gonna probably win some money doing it. So I think it's a bit different than the traditional way of doing it. And so due to tokens and also the rest of the incentives that we create, the costs of operating a platform are way reduced because they are automatic. We don't need labor to do the matching or labor to do the kinds of transactions that this kind of systems enable. So in this case, they identified that especially platforms are where the first use case is easier to understand and where the cost structure is going to be really affected. So blockchain will lower the barriers to entry. We will not have our private information leaked for free as our travels are going to Uber, our friends are going to Facebook. One of the examples is the BeeToken for the Brave browser for ads. So if we want to earn money around our interactions, we will be able to do it. But it's not the way it's done today, that we don't earn the money and it's the platforms that earn all the money. There is a clear matching on demand and supply. So it's transparent for everyone who is asking and who is receiving, and everything is registered. And there are also clear rules regarding reputation system. We're gonna see some examples that, and also I think the topic of the oracles may make this topic a bit more complex to discuss. But if we look at the traditional process and a process with blockchain, I think it's clear for everyone that these rules are much more transparent. Maybe we are still not able to do this kind of reputation systems already, but theoretically we're going to arrive to that stage. And one of the key things that I referred in the introduction was that we don't know what kind of transactions are considered and if there are transactions that are not considered. So Uber, I don't know how they pick the drivers. I hope they pick it well, but we don't know it, right? So in this case, it's gonna be very transparent how we can participate in that market. So one of the questions that I have for you, and I think we can also discuss it after, is what will happen to the fee, right? Because today we have some kind of platforms that charge 30%. And if we theoretically apply the blockchain to this kind of models, what is going to be the fee? Because this is where this is one of the places that the companies can compete in the future. And I'm also going to show you multiple examples how they also tackling this problem. But I think it's a very interesting topic that we can discuss. So one very simple example on a company called Locktrip, and what they do is Airbnb, more or less, booking disruptor. And what they do is they implemented on with this technology, they implemented the way of me and in the example John can pay a hotel in fiat. His fiat is converted to the token, and the booking is executed with 0% commission. And so everything is done by Locktrip. And then on the hotel side, they have a smart contract, and that translates again the token to fiat, and the payout is done in fiat to the hotel. So here we can clearly view an abstraction for end users, or end users and hotels. So for the two sides of the platform, that they can still both operate in fiat, and we have an operator in the middle that charges 0% commission. So this is the most simple example. You can check their website. You can book real hotels in four cities. I was checking Madrid, and they had all the official hotels, and it was cheaper than booking. So maybe next time I'm gonna book my stay through this website. So to conclude, now it's possible to verify and audit transaction attributes, credentials, and reputations of the parties, characteristics of the goods and service exchanged. The platforms on the blockchain rise with this without the informational advantage, so they don't get the market power that we normally associate with the ones that operate on the traditional way. We have permissionless innovation, so we just need to be compatible with protocol and consensus rules. So here the authors talk about the risk. There is the expropriation risk, and I think one of the good examples is the Facebook ads apps that with the change of rules, for example, Tinder was not able to log in for one day. With the change of rules, there are a very large number of apps that they have to be adapted, because from one day to the other, Facebook decided another thing. So in this case, we will be able to adapt our business models, our services with a lot of time in advance, because normally there will be the majority that needs to vote for something to change on the rules. One point that the authors also discuss, and this is the very problematic topic, and it's around the ICOs. But they also tell us that the ICOs, although the bad buzz that they have been having, is that the funding process has changed, and now that we can crowdfund, so it's very, very easier to get to more people and get more money, and do not depend on the normal way of raising capital, such as through venture capital firms. And one last point that can also be a problem, and I think it's also a topic that I have seen being discussed a lot, is that yes, the minorities face less lock-in and hold-up because they can fork, but forking every day is also not good. So I think this is one of the topics that we can also discuss later. What are the advantages or disadvantages of this kind of possibility in this technology? So now I will pass for concrete examples. I selected two, as it was explained in the agenda. So the first one is Arcade City. It tries to be a Uber disruptor. and start in the mobility space. So for them, the way they are going to do profit is going to be very different. So they will have premium services. So travel is guaranteed with zero commission, but then premium services and probably a system similar to Grab in Asia that accepts promotions from other brands and a lot of interactions with third parties. It's one of the venues where they will try to get profit. The second one, and I found it very, very interesting, it's the economies of scale of building that platform, and they will step up and say that they will be responsible for the collective purchasing or negotiating training or optimization, some kind of supply services that the car needs. So if the car needs tires, they will negotiate for everyone because they will have a lot of people. And also the example of insurance. And the last one, I think it's the most controversial one. It's the opt-in development fees, because what they are saying is X% of what I'm paying or $1 that I'm paying, it's going to be only for development. And I think that in this case, it's going to be very, very hard. And I think we can more or less discuss if it's similar to the publishing and the media industry. Because when we start saying that the news are going to get paid because the journalists need to get paid, and it's still very, very controversial. And so I think the way the path through this last way of doing profit is not as easy as the other ones. So I've shown you that through blockchain, your intermediation fee can be reduced. And so in this case, and this comes from their white paper, so we can see that Uber normally takes 28% of the fees. And so they want to give all that for the drivers. So as you can see, it's an economical advantage that will, I don't know how Uber is going to respond. And one key metric is their driver retention. So their turnover in Arcade City in Austin, Texas, because it's where it's one of the places that they started. You can see there is a lot of difference. So even if in the best case in Uber, it's 50%. And in case of the Arcade City, it will probably be around 90%. So it's completely different. And I think it's clear for everyone that it's economically more competitive. So the second example is BeeToken. And he wants to be an Airbnb disruptor, but in a different way of Lock City that I presented you before. So Lock City is the most simple abstraction and the most simple use case I think we can build around blockchain and disrupting platforms. Arcade City tries to do this and profit from the next stage of services. And here BeeToken proposes a different thing. But just to show you that the same thing happens here, because in BeeToken we can have 10 to 22% of fees that now they want to charge 0, right? So just for you to understand where these fees come from, so platforms can take 3 to 15%. And we also have a lot of financial fees, so Visa and MasterCard fees, foreign transactions, and one thing that is called dynamic currency conversion that I don't know if you noticed when you're trying to use your cards abroad. They ask you if you want to be charged on your home currency, and this adds them 1% of fee, so you're going to be charged more. And we also, we are using behavioral behavioral insights because, oh no, it's my home currency, I'm going to purchase in my home currency, but maybe the economical cost is higher, and probably it is due to this kind of fees. So BeeToken here wants to profit from its protocol. So what do they propose? So they have three protocols: a payment protocol, arbitration protocol, and a reputation protocol that they want to build as the basis for other kinds of platforms. So they believe that you will always have to pay. You will always have some kind of transactions that will have some kind of conflicts, and those conflicts can be based on a reputation protocol to get solved. So my last slide is just I collected some extra cases if you want to discuss extra cases, or if you want to suggest new ones. So the first one is how do we handle identity, and especially now around GDPR. So one of the proposals, and in this case identity appears on the paper, is how do you handle GDPR and the right to be forgotten. And their way of handling this is that you will have two blockchains, and you will have the link, and when you ask to be forgotten, that link is destroyed. And although theoretically possible, I think we haven't seen any concrete example, at least that I'm aware of. The second one is IP licensing. I think it's very clear that for streaming music and for giving the rights to the people that really created the content, blockchain can be a use case, because we have a problem because it's the principal and agent relationship. So we have conflicting objectives. We have Spotify that wants to pay less, and the authors that want to earn more. And so I don't know how Spotify, for example, shares that with the authors. I don't know who validates that, but we all believe that it works. And I think in this case, the blockchain can really, really help on giving transparency. Another example is I think it's a very, very simple example around university transcripts. So to show you where you come from and what you really did. And I think it's very clear for a lot of people that put a lot of things on LinkedIn, for example, and we are not sure, and we are unable to validate if what they say is really true. So we have to believe it. And this is a very simple example that I think it can be very profitable for the people that implement it, and very useful for anyone that wants to check if it's really true, where you come from and what you say you have done. And the last one is one of the topics that I already referred in the beginning. It was around tracking goods with immutable characteristics, right? The art piece is unique. That Picasso is unique. Probably we can track its travels. However, we don't know if it's a forgery or if it's original. And in this case, probably not an IoT sensor or art expert. So we have to be very careful, because we are still trying to merge the offline world with the digital world, and the offline world has to be validated. So that's why, and to recall what the authors say, is that the intermediaries are not gonna disappear. Their nature is gonna be different. The business cases are gonna be different. The business models are gonna be different. But there are still a lot of cases where we need a trusted intermediary, because it's not going to be tomorrow we're going to wake up and all the IoT sensors are safe and they can detect all of these things. So that's it. I'm available for questions. You have my LinkedIn profile. You have my Medium profile also if you want to check any of the blog posts. I hope you have enjoyed it. And I think now it's the best part is around the discussion and how can we really identify where can blockchain have more impact in the economical perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tiago, for your presentation. I think it was a very good summary of the paper, which I found interesting, an interesting read. I leave the floor to the audience if there is any questions so far. If not, I can break the ice if need be. So if somebody has any question, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Nikhil, you want to go?
Go ahead, yeah.
Yes. See, what I was thinking was that we have discussed, I think, 2-3 projects like BeeToken, which is Airbnb disruptor, and Lock Trip, Arcade City. So what I found common was that this commission system, this commission setup is going to go. So how are we replacing, how is the platform being incentivized instead? Because in the centralized models, you know, if it's an Uber or an Airbnb, they can charge 20 to 30% of the commission, and that's their prime revenue. Even if these platforms holds a certain amount of tokens as a reserve, and if the value of the tokens is going to go up, is that the model how these platforms will make money? What's their revenue model?
Yeah. So the in these cases, I think so. BeeToken wants to earn fees on creating their protocol. We also have 0x protocol that doesn't charge any fees. So I think this is going to be very interesting times in terms of what are you able to charge for or not. What is clear from these examples is that the normal intermediation that we see today is lost, right? Arcade City is not going to charge on that trip. They hope to gather enough people on the platform that if they want to negotiate physical goods, they will be able to leverage it, because in the physical goods, it's easier for you to increase your negotiation power than just getting another token to access some digital asset. So I think here one of the ways, and this is very hard, and I think everyone is struggling with this, is they are focusing on the physical and the offline part and how they can integrate with that so that they gain power. So you're not going to be charged on your travel, but they're going to earn money because you are using the system, because they're going to negotiate the insurance with a discount and they're going to get a percentage for them. If that is enough for the platform to keep running, that's another question. And I think we have a lot to investigate. But I think what is clear around these topics is that the normal use cases that we see for intermediation, so any startup on the last 2-3 years before blockchain started to be discussed was, oh, my startup is the Uber for X. My startup is the Uber for student houses. So I think that kind of discussion is going to change, because you will be able to bootstrap a platform way easier and way faster. So it's that value is not anymore. The added value is not that big. So I think that you say I'm going to start that startup around student houses, and I say, okay, it takes you 2 days, so don't charge me for that. Don't charge me to connect to the other side. So get another way of charging me, because that value I already have. And I think it's a very complex question. And based on that, I would also like to understand, what do you think? Do you think it's this physical part, or that they will be able to upsell on the digital side?
I think both, because if personally I am conceiving something like this, I won't see any reason for not incentivizing, because if I'm running if I'm creating a platform where we are switching this Uber into a blockchain, and I'm running the system, we can still take a commission out of it because we are providing for the services. Of course, there is a problem of centralization things happening there. I just omitted, but I don't see any problem charging for running the services if it's reasonable. So I think we can still have multiple revenue systems, providing the best services to the people on a reasonable rate. Also, at the same time, creating value for the platform, to the people, to the organization as well. But the problem is that with the blockchains coming, this model of organization itself is going to change, right? Because if you don't have equity, or if it's not a centralized model, there is this problem of how are you going to charge, how the founders' equity is going to split. There is a problem there, but still, I think this commission model can work.
Yeah. So if I may ask back, so imagine that you are saying that it's possible through digital, right? But imagine that you just heard about a competitor that charges 0% commission. How are you going to justify it?
I think that problem is still there now, because this companies with a huge war chest, huge funding, they are always taking on the small players. So eventually they have to go run out. It's the same problem happening. If you have the sufficient resources to run the company, then you can charge a predatory thing, lower the prices. I think that's already happening here. If blockchain comes along, if somebody can manage this kind of stuff, eventually the competitors also have to switch to this model or lower their fares. But that doesn't provide an alternative. Blockchains do provide an alternative for this model, this model. I don't know, because if I'm a blockchain company, still a blockchain, cab aggregator which runs on blockchain, and I launch my own tokens and I work this model, and I have some funding also. I have huge resources with me, with sufficient funds, and I come to the market, and if I can charge very lower fares and take all the competitors out, then I think it's still working, and I think it will be. It's still that kind of this kind of problems are gonna come there too. That's what I think. Maybe, as you said, if a startup launches, they don't have that kind of funds, they'll charge 0 commission and switch to alternate hybrid models. Even if it's a highly resourceful startup, they have to switch to that kind of alternatives. Yes, it can happen. Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I see what you're saying, that if there's an alternative to the commission model, then it's a whole new way of doing things better. Yes, I can see that. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Here, I would like to comment on the fact that since blockchain is a variant of accounting, or rather an upgrade of the accounting system from double entry to triple entry, and the current business or the current structure of the business is built around double entry, so the entire business models will also shift. I agree upon that. And way I see it moving is more in a community manner, wherein, let's say, if a platform, let's say Arcade City, let's consider a platform for Uber, like Uber drivers and passengers, that kind of platform is there. So here, what I see is it's more, if it goes more in the community dimension, where all the members are participants of that particular model, and they will have a say. So let's say they will have a say in the governance parameter. So the governance parameters would be like, what should be the fees for the developers. Initially, if we just compare one graph, the amount of development, core development, and subsequent development. So the core development is happening within the first 6 months, and lateral development or the subsequent development the graph goes down, drastically down. So in that per se, it's like the initial time, and then the budgets will also go in accordance, and that should be fed inside the governance system. So that's my take on it. And that particular and there should be some variance, or let's say the transaction cost that is there. Let's say X% is the transaction cost that goes to the developers, X% is the transaction cost that goes to the let's say driver itself, and other goes to reserves or something of that sort, or community building.
And are these all private companies? I mean, Arcade City, BeeTokens, are there private companies, or it's something decentralized where people collaborate and do their own stuff?
Ideally, based on my observation, most of these are individuals working in teams and trying to spread the network. But that's where the what do you say, the legal structures are not that evolved to adopt, or let's say there is a need for a structural change in the mindset also. So there are two changes that are more important to, if you look at it objectively. One is the structural change in the by virtue of legal and the business to evolve, and to understand and then evolve. Right now, businesses are not able to digest it. They will have to digest it first.
Yeah, well, what I can see is that if I was just taking the Arcade City website, and I can see here, like, say goodbye to corporate office. Arcade City is building a global network of local driver cooperatives called guilds. So,
yeah.
So it's more like a, I don't know how it's not a, it's not a company. It's not a company.
It's not a company.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other way, let's say, if the other way in which the companies can adopt to such kind of frameworks, the best example in the real world that I could see of is Android, wherein Android is totally open source, but anyone can come in and contribute. Android, Linux are examples, but you can say that these models are evolution of Android structure, which was Android or Linux structures, which was open source. This is out there in the community, but now has a monetary angle to it.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see that.
Let's try to maybe keep discussing the economics like generally from the paper instead of focusing so much on specific projects, or we can take that discussion offline afterwards. Sana, do you want to make a point?
I wanted to ask and to add something. First of all, I also want to say thank you very much. It was a really, really, really nice presentation. Well done. I wonder if we are not actually having a really fundamental change now in the whole economy. So what I mean by this is, at the moment we have an economy which is based on companies and customers. And what I also see in the examples you've shown right now is that they still quite adapt to this model. So even though we have decentralized platforms, there's still something like a as you also had in your discussion, we can't even say if it's a company, but it's something like an entity which gains through the tokens or through incentive some value to provide service. But I'm asking myself, are we not actually on the long term transforming into a participation economy, so that we actually have one day we have a Airbnb, which is actually a DAO. So we are all owners of the same platform, and we all take decisions in a really complex way, I will assume. So we will have something like a democratic government system in the DAO, but there is no customer company relationship anymore, but actually, so make the system running on its own. So we will all participate in this Airbnb as customers, but at the same time, we are also owner of this decentralized Airbnb. So I wonder if not on the long run, the whole economy is actually changing into a participation economy. What do you think about this?
Okay, that is very very hard question. But I would like to start by what is happening now. Is that I purchase a token because it's my way of accessing that service. I displace, so after I use that service, I don't care about that token anymore. That what I'm describing here, and of course I'm generalizing, is the normal usage for a mass adoption case, right? And I think that is clear with the first example that I've shown around Blocktree. And so the transition to a customer owner scenario, I think is based on our discussion on the question before around the community and the stake on the governance. Because I think we will only keep the stakes or the tokens that we believe that are going to give us more money or a better life, right? Because it's still an incentive. And so in this case, I think the community scenario, it fits your participation economic way of seeing it. I'm still not sure how this is gonna happen in the commercial side of it. So if I want to buy, for example, an iPhone, what is the difference? Because I can understand that on the community side, if we want to all participate to improve our community and that this has these rules on governance, I think, yes, we will be customers and owners, and it can be a DAO, and we will change from a public organization that has very old rules, 30 people, and probably no answers, that's what we have today, and to a completely automatic answer and decision-making organization. But if we go on the business side, I'm still struggling. But tell me if you have any additional perspective on that.
Well, if I can, I'd have I would go one step further actually, and maybe think back on what blockchain is doing to the financial sector right now, or for the last decade or so now. But it's basically saying that what the sector was doing before on a centralized and proprietary type of infrastructure is now more or less right accessible for free as a default option, and there is no property associated with it or anything. And I think with blockchain projects, what we are seeing is really early stage, of course, but what we're seeing is that the old mentality of organizations are being applied to this new sphere, right? New sphere of activities that blockchain represents. But on the mid to long term, maybe short to mid, I don't know, maybe what we'll see is exactly the same, but with more types of activities, more protocols, if you will, where you will probably see a commoditization process of very fundamental way of interacting for commercial purposes with projects, and therefore what is today used or you are being charged with a commission in some projects will be free in the future, because it's going to be so widely spread and replicable. So there's going to be a race towards the diminishing of fees up to the point where the cost will be so low that everybody can replicate it, and therefore the smallest amount of fees that you will see is where there is an actual person or somebody doing something somewhere offline, basically. And this is where some added value can be justified. This is my take on it.
Hi, Laurent. I will also add few things like, in present digital, platforms like Airbnb, Uber, the marginal cost of acquiring a new customer is almost zero. So that is the reason the feasibility of cost commissionless platform is there in the side, and that is the reason the demand is for commissionless. People will be already knowing it that the system is already developed, and there's no much more work being required by Uber or any kind of platform to acquire any new customer. So marginal cost is almost zero in majority of the digital platforms now, and this is the core complex of changing economics. There's not much research has been done on when what happens when the marginal cost of any product or any economy goes almost around to zero. The research is not happening in the economics field much more in there.
That is true, and actually this is something that I saw quickly mentioned in the paper, but I wanted to also, it was one of my questions to you, Tiago. The dispute resolution thing is mentioned in the paper, but very shortly. And I mean, it's true that today blockchain is decreasing costs dramatically for being more efficient if still used as is. I mean, but with the dispute resolution, I mean, this is something that blockchains on itself cannot do. This is something that you will need humans to handle in some form. And there are some projects trying to upload that kind of dispute resolution mechanism to the blockchain. But this is where I think humans, for not, in comparison to algorithm, will still have to do personally. And therefore, this is where you can provide a service that goes beyond the zero marginal cost type of architecture of digital platforms.
Yeah. So on that topic, I think it's we can go completely automatic. So we can decide that the disputes are automatically settled as X, Y, Z, and they are automatically programmed, or they are still decided by an oracle that I think was the first iteration of those kinds of problems. Then now there is some rise on like some extra consensus needed on this dispute resolution. I would risk it and say that we are still not in front of a model that is stable enough to handle those cases. And I think that's why the hybrid solutions, they are going to be used, and they're going to take a lot of money and earn a lot of profit around it, because people will still trust the brand, will still trust the intermediary, because I don't think we are in that topic mature enough to put it on some middle ground where some people decide. As an example, BeeToken, Arcade City, you have a dispute around your travel. You put 3 people because it has to be odd to get the result. So you put 1 driver and 1 user, right? Who is the third one? And I think it's very hard, or at least I cannot foresee a simple answer for that problem. Because driver, you know what is going to happen. If you put another user, you know what is going to happen. And so it's very, very hard. There is a new field around curated markets that I have still not searched enough to give you a proper answer. And I don't know if we are that mature, but maybe it's not. It's lack of knowledge on my side.
Yeah, sure. And then we have the whole hypothesis or proposition from Ricardian contracts that people are trying to implement in some way to, because I mean, if you want to sell your house on the blockchain today, that's not possible, right? So, and this is where disputes or huge disputes resolution are going to be needed for instance. So yeah, I mean, we're not there yet, obviously.
Yeah. I don't know if there are any more questions.
Well, I mean, regarding the ways to charge fees, I think we can be more creative on that front, and especially because this is a Cryptoeconomics UnConference. I think Cryptoeconomics might be able to add or to provide that creativity in how to maybe try to go away from the classical schemes of charging fees towards something much more interesting, or that can at least not being perceived as a sort of small intermediary again.
Yeah, so on that side, and I think it's a natural continuation of what we were discussing around curated markets. I think there is a fee to be charged on curation. I strongly believe it, because we are witnessing a lot of information, a lot of projects, a lot of services, a lot of everything. And I think that we will be willing to pay to get a selection of that. How does that selection happen in a decentralized way, in an efficient way? That's another topic. But I think there is a fee that I can foresee in the next, probably in the short medium term, is curation. But tell me if you have anything different. Yeah.
I don't think so. This is Nikhil here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Nikhil.
So, with regard to that particular question about fees, so my thought on that was, okay, there are price discovery mechanisms that can be applied, right? So we can both basically look at, even if you look at the platforms like Arcade City and Uber, even though it is proprietary, there is a price discovery mechanism that that is going on over there with the search pricing and the other thing. Similarly, my thought was, then why can't we apply a similar type of price discovery mechanism around things like developing new features for the network, or even maintenance and improvement of the network itself. So essentially, have a category for what would be called value-added services at a level different from the transaction itself. So maybe something like okay, like you were talking about dispute resolution, we could probably have a class of participants that actually go in and provide those services, and there's a price discovery. They bid against each other, or there is some kind of price discovery that happens that allows you to have an efficient pricing for these things. So another one would be insurance, right? So if you take the transport example again, so I think Tiago was mentioning something about going and trying to see if you could get bulk insurance. Well, you could have the insurance providers become participants in the network itself, right? So it's and then basically have that on a transactional basis for every what do you call it, for every ride that is taken, a dynamic valuation of what would be the insurance risk, and we could have like a transactional insurance cost.
Yeah, so I think on that side, and I'm gonna go back to the BeeToken just to complement on that answer. I think what you are saying is that, for example, you believe that these three protocols can be ways of generating profit. So you gave the example of you have arbitration or conflict resolution, and so what you are saying is that the way the fees are going to compete is around protocols, probably, no?
Well, so you have two aspects, right? So you have, one is like the actual primary business that that particular use case, or the primary use case, which is in the case of Airbnb, which is renting out apartments or renting out accommodation. In the case of Uber, it is transport. In the case of I don't know, the diamond use case, it's basically making sure that a diamond is not fraudulent, right? So we talked about, okay, there are certain use cases where you need an extra service other than that particular business case itself. You need additional services to be provided in order to realize the entire thing, realize the entire flow. So if you take your Airbnb use case, or that travel company use case, it's one thing would be, okay, you have zero commission on the hotel fees, but how do you know that that particular hotel has the proper hygiene or the proper reputation or the proper level of luxury that you require or you want, right? So those would be other services. So my point is, whenever you're building a network like this, these other parties also should become part of that network in order to create an ecosystem. And like Harsh was talking about, when it becomes a community kind of a thing, all of these ecosystems can actually come down to becoming like very small individual businesses or small businesses that are just participating on one end. And then similarly, what I'm thinking is the network itself, right? Maintaining the network, software upgrades, making sure that there is bug patches and all of that. That itself could become a value-added service. You could have a bunch of developers competing on bounties, right? Bug bounties would be a classic case. So the particular network itself would be deciding, right, that okay, this would be the price for this particular patch, and then doing a price discovery to figure out, okay, who would be the best set of people or a person who can actually deliver that software patch and then validate that. So my point basically is all of that becomes a kind of like a community ecosystem, and the network kind of enables all of it. Am I making sense?
I would like to join if I can, because I really like what you just mentioned, Nikhil. I think it's exactly this transformation of becoming networks, and maybe that's a little bit provocating. But you said before, how will we buy an iPhone in the future? So my question is, do we still need an iPhone, and do we? Because if you think about it right now, what is the price of an iPhone? It's 90% is branding, or it's even more. The cost of producing an iPhone is really, really low. And by entering more and more machines in the labor force, maybe in the future we don't even have to do anything to produce these technical devices. And all the other services. So, for example, as Nikhil just said, maybe your iPhone gets broken, but maybe it doesn't have to be repaired by the company anymore. Maybe you have a community which is offering their service based on reputation to repair your mobile or to add additional color, whatever things that are just at the moment all provided by the company. And the actual branding is actually not necessary. And also, we know that the companies right now, they produce mobiles, which are most of the time destroying themselves after 2-3 years, so that we will buy new ones. But if we transform the whole economy, maybe the whole consumer-based society we have will disappear, and everything will become a network. And for the rest, we have the machines. I mean, that's a little bit far in the future, but this is how I can imagine it.
No, sure, but we can go on that path. But my next question would be, who builds the machines, and how can you make it profitable, right? Because you still have to access it. and you still have the problem. You still have the problem to access the network.
Actually, so in terms, so to take that particular point, Tiago, so the building of the machines, that actually would need an initial investment, and that initial investment is what I feel an ICO should have been. I mean, I'm not saying that ICO today is what it is. Maybe there's a lot of controversy around ICOs, but what I mean is that the idea of, okay, somebody going and saying, okay, here's this idea that I have, or here's this maybe a group of people coming together and saying this is what we want to do, and then having interested people invest and build that network. That might be that initial force. But again, what we need to be clear about, what we need to be careful about, and what I think things are evolving too, is that that's just an initial investment. And then once that becomes large enough, the network becomes large enough, there would be a self-sustaining momentum. And to take the point that Sandra was talking about iPhones, it's actually very interesting because Apple actually sues people. They go legally to governments and to to large. They go after these people who actually offer third-party services to repair iPhones, right? So it's not unless you are an Apple certified repair person, you cannot repair an iPhone, even though you may actually be able to do things that Apple themselves refuse to do, right? So and that's one aspect about the consumer economy, right? Like she said, the use and throw economy can convert into more of an ecosystem where you actually rebuild or reuse stuff, recycle stuff that would have been thrown away. And the other thing about it is that the like she pointed out, the cost of hardware is actually a very small portion of the entire product, especially in the phone business, especially in the iPhone business anyway. So it should be possible for you to actually directly reach out to places like Shenzhen in China, where they actually do the manufacturing and create relationships and set up where you can actually custom build your iPhone. In fact, you can do that today to a certain extent. If you go to Shenzhen, China, right now, you can actually go to their markets and actually choose to build an iPhone clone based on parts that they have on display in the market over there. It's actually quite amazing, and that you can just digitize that is my thought. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to add one very interesting dynamics to the discussion. Is like, let's say if a use case is there, and the dynamics is something in the lines wherein, let's say, I'll start from the IoT part and then go towards the community part. So let's say if you were to look at Bitcoin mining, so Bitcoin mining ASICs were, if you look at it objectively, they were community designed. So ASICs were community designed. So what if the IoT business itself can be a community-driven ICO? Point number one. So let's say there is one use case which is needing one particular set of chips. So this is the cost of the chip, and that's represented in that particular IoT development token, and it provides you the chip at a particular rate of token. And you can apply it in your use case, or you can ask the community to custom design it. So there is one IoT token which is represented in the market, and there is X amount of design cost. So that design cost goes to the designer. So that this is IoT as one ecosystem. Now, for a use case, let's say Uber for blockchains, there are multiple edges. There are multiple types of people that are coming in. For example, let's say IoT is one. Other one is the arbitration. Other one is, let's say, arbitration that is coming in. Other one is, let's say, there is some developer support that is coming in and going out. So how about each of these are individual communities of their own, forming a support system for multiple ICOs or multiple use cases. So arbitration as a blockchain is a support for other use case. It can mean provenance, it can mean supply chain, it can mean somewhere else. So that becomes a network in itself. And at the same time, you have IoT as a service, you have, let's say, development as a service or niche development as a service. So that can be linked up. So rather than having all the arbitration elements inside the framework, how about keeping it loose end and let the other community take that part up? So this is another thought line, because let's say if one use case tries to integrate all the particular functionalities that are required for it to survive, the cost will go too high. Rather, in order to keep the cost lean, the ideal way would be let other communities that are existing collaborate, and it moves very fast.
Absolutely. That's a very good point. Right?
Yeah, I think what you were saying is that each activity has its corresponding blockchain, and there are enough other activities that put together go back to what we can say it's
yes, exactly,
end-to-end, right?
Exactly. Because by virtue of, let's say, if you have a functionality like the X or so, the transparent rate parity can be achieved between the use case, between the case. For example, let's say arbitration is having its own coin, and if you have a DEX kind of situation, which is also on the chain, or either on chain, off chain, we can have a rate parity over there. So one token of Uber is equal to 10 tokens of arbitration coin. So that rate parity is there. So now you can decide that, okay, this is becoming too expensive, this is becoming too lean. So that can be defined upon that particular point.
Okay, so my only point on that is it makes a lot of sense, and I think it's a nice way of building a new business, disrupt all the ICOs that are coming. The question here is how they are going to survive, because I don't think there are still not enough working systems for you to be that specialized, right?
Yeah. Over here, I would point out on the fact that the base system that is there, so the base platform that are there. So this is just my opinion. The base platform that are there are not sufficient enough to provide this kind of environment right now. Ethereum at a point becomes too costly. I don't know about yours. Hyperledger centralized, so it does not provide that kind of framework for such a system to be built.
No, I think it's something that needs to evolve. So to take that point about Tiago's point about the lack of users or the lack of audience for it to become a survivable business, absolutely. Perhaps in the initial stages, you might have a very small community and it has to grow. And that there is obviously, as in all things, a risk that you have to take. But again, to one advantage of going down Harsh's way is that if you are taking, say, a field like insurance, right? You can have agricultural insurance, you can have auto insurance, you can have insurance on diamonds, you can insure practically anything you want, right? Travel, anything you want. So what happens if we could come up with, say, a community, the insurance community comes up with a standard protocol or a standard network, right? That all of these other blockchains or all these other communities that are coming up with can then leverage in a cost arbitrated manner. So then basically that makes sense for the insurance community, because we are not actually concentrating on one use case, you're concentrating on all of them, or rather you're making yourself available to all of them. And then the challenge basically becomes then, okay, what would be that protocol and how you would bring it together, and yeah, that's definitely something that needs to that still needs to be worked on or still needs to evolve.
Yeah, I would say that this specific angle is I don't know if you are used to do this in the UnConferences or after the UnConferences, but I think it's well worth a paper or like an article to be put together by us, because I think it's a very good perspective that at least I was not aware of discussing it yet, but even for the community. But then again, if you think it's useful, I think we can work on like a common perspective on this, because I think it's a very good topic to be discussed. The specialization versus generalization that we are witnessing. Okay, well, I think that's a great idea that we can keep discussing in maybe in Telegram group, but we are already 10 minutes after the hour, so I propose that we finish this session. Again, thank you very much, Tiago, for your initiative. I think it was a really brilliant points and talk in general, and very interesting discussion. So thank you very much, everyone, for being here today, and we hope to see you next week for another topic that we will disclose shortly. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thanks, Tiago. Thank you.
you.
All.
Thank you.
Bye. Good night. Bye-bye. Yes, thanks.